of the way it's being implemented. We need a fresh vote.
Robert Largan.
Thank you, Mr Mundell. HS2 is probably the most poorly explained and poorly understood policy in our national discourse. Over the last decade, a series of myths have been perpetuated by a combination of muddled thinking and the efforts of well-funded self-interest groups. I welcome this opportunity to address some of those myths head-on. Firstly, despite its name, HS2 has never been simply about shaving 30 minutes off journey times down to London. It has always been about tackling the capacity challenge on the country's most important strategic railway, the West Coast Main Line. If we were to cancel HS2 and do nothing, within a few years, this most vital artery of our entire national railway network would quite simply grind to a halt, causing huge damage to our economy, especially in the North and Midlands. Now, I've seen many claim that the internet and remote working will take care of this problem all by itself, ignoring the fact that, excluding the pandemic, rail passenger figures have gone up every single year since the internet was invented. It also ignores the issue of rail freight. I'm all for harnessing technology, but with the best will in the world, you cannot deliver millions of tons of goods via Zoom. We're already seeing the consequences of being overly reliant on road haulage, with the problems caused by the continental shortage of HGV drivers. A failure to invest in our rail freight capacity would only make this worse. Secondly, let's examine the cost of HS2. And let's give the anti-HS2 lobby the benefit of the doubt, take their absolute worst-case scenario cost figures at face value and their worst-case scenario completion date at face value. We're looking at spending just over £5 billion a year. For context, that's about half of what we spend on overseas aid. It's a lot of money, but investing around 0.25% of our GDP every year for a limited period to fix the most important railway network in our country is hardly disproportionate. Thirdly, and perhaps the most common argument against HS2, is that we should be prioritising fixing existing commuter rail services instead, buying into a completely false choice narrative. After all, London wasn't forced to choose between Crossrail and Thameslink. The North and the Midlands shouldn't be forced to choose either. It also completely misses the point of HS2 to free up capacity on existing commuter lines and enable other transport improvements like Northern Powerhouse Rail. And when the Transport Select Committee visited Birmingham, we heard very compelling evidence from Andy Street on HS2 allows improvements like the Midlands Rail Hub as well. My own constituency is a good example of this. I have two railway lines which have very limited capacity that run through one of the busiest corridors in the country, Stockport to Manchester. This HS2 would free up that capacity and allow for a significant improvement in rail services for places like Buxton New Mills, Chinley and Whaley Bridge. Finally, and I believe most erroneously, a myth has developed that HS2 would be bad for the environment. If you're serious about tackling climate change and decarbonising economy, I cannot see how you can credibly oppose HS2, a project specifically designed to reduce our reliance on domestic flights, to get cars and HGVs off the road, shifting people and freight from a high-carbon to a low-carbon form of transport. So in conclusion, completing HS2 is good for jobs, good for the economy, good for public transport and good for tackling climate change. It's vital we keep HS2 on track.